don't think that John Gray started all this just so he'd have his own golf course, do you?
I think he already had a golf course when he started this, so I'd say no.
That's right. That's right. I think one point might be made here. What made a good city in Europe was that in the old days, they started out with a finite area. It was within a picture frame, walled in. And the town or the city was not larger than that, and never did get beyond that. Why the American city has gotten so loused up is that you just keep on annexing adjoining farmland, you keep growing without plan. Here we have a finite border around the Sunriver. It's the U.S. National Forest. We can't go beyond that. This forces us then, very early in our planning game, to decide how do we best utilize the land to provide all the facilities that we, in our common sense, can anticipate people are likely to want to have here. This is why we've set aside a very large area for the country mall. It's larger than the number of very large downtown city areas. It may be too large, but at least it's not going to be too small.
Is it because you don't like cities?
It's not because I do not like cities. I live in one. I like it. It was an opportunity to control your environment to work within, to see what could be done as an example of good land use planning. Whether or not involve a new town or not was an incidental matter. It turns out it's going to involve a new frontier town, but the concept of a new town necessarily was not the reason for this land and being behind the development of it. But as you study it, it made pretty good sense to be thinking about a new type of town.
There's such a consistency, a continuous point of view that seems to be all the way through here, that if you try to look for something out of character, which I've done in the short time I've been here, and I can't find it. I mean, it all seems to rhyme. How does that happen?
I think that happens because you work with good planning people and you go through a number of contingent or temporary plans and you test those and you question those and you re-examine them, and eventually you come up with a responsible type master plan which has flexibility but which still has a lot of a unity that ties it together. Now, whether that's going to be all condominiums or all houses 20 years from now, we're not that smart. We don't know what the market is, but we're going to have consistency and quality throughout the project.
What kind of people are here now and will come, and what do they do and what will they do?
And I'd be guessing on this, but it's certainly at the outset, it's going more towards the recreational second home buyer, a professional person, a lawyer, a doctor, dentist, a businessman, sometimes retiree or semi-retired people, generally the more affluent income to date. This is not our desire, but this is the person that's currently buying the property in general. There are exceptions to that, of course, because we do want to have over a period of time, hopefully what we call a balanced economy here, and have home sites or home units or dwelling units that can be afforded by people of modest means.
And what do they do?
Well, mostly the people who are here, of course, or who are buying property are doing it right now, I think, for a second home and a future retirement.
I meant, are they all golfers, would you say, or are most of them fishermen?
I would think you wouldn't find any particular pattern. I think most primarily the reason I suspect people buy here is that they like the environment, they like the quality, they like the control of the environs and the development, and they respect what we're doing and the investment we've made to date. They're pretty well assured that we're going to do what we say, and I think we've proven that. And I doubt if a person buys here necessarily because he's a fisherman or he's a hunter or he's a golfer or he's a tennis person. And when I found at the beach the development there, that I'm sure it's the same pattern here. A great number of people who buy on the golf course are non-golfers. They just like the view.
How do you work with Mr. Royston? What do you do? Do you sketch on the back of envelopes?
I don't do much sketching. I'm not designed that way. Mainly going out on the property, I would suppose, is our most effective way of getting an idea started.
You've been hiking around here today, haven't you? Could you tell us what you were talking about?
The other day we had the driver for the Caterpillar. This is the man that does all the shaping of the berms. That's the mounds of dirt you see piled around. We spent quite a lot of time on critiquing the placement of big rocks, which were not right. Decisions on 4 bicycle path underpasses under some major roads that will get built this summer. Try and anticipate where traffic will flow from the various home areas into our country mall, which is a major potential shopping center. What else, Robert?
We also went over onto the other side of the river to see the future area of Sunriver, which we hope will be an automobile-free community. The primary thing that we did today was to reinforce the pedestrian and bicycle system. I think that at the present time, we're all a part of the automobile. The automobile is the module of our society in the way we live. It is often said that there are some people who would take the automobile to bed with them if they could. If you think about it, in the past 20 or 30 years, the entire environment that we live in is not controlled by the human community or society in dealing with each other, but it's been controlled by where the roads go, where the sewers go, where the utilities go, and especially where the roads go. Okay, Sunriver doesn't do that. It seems to me that in Sunriver, nature, conservation, and the human society and how it hits each other, or how people react to each other, will allow things to happen that haven't happened in cities for a long time. People will rediscover nature, and that's built into the framework of this. The people come here from all walks of life. They're all ages. They're of all ethnic origins, is our hope. The thing that knits them together is a kind of respect for nature, a new kind of cultural environment. But they also know on the practical side that the air is clean and that they are within thousands and thousands and thousands of acres of forest land, and that they're surrounded by a 100-mile loop and 100 lakes, so that the whole recreation picture, even though is a good one, so that if Dad wants to move out into nature, even other than Sunriver is really a wedge driven into a national forest, that there's a lot to do for the family at home. But I think in a very poetic way that Sunriver will show people that there's something else besides the status quo in the cities or suburbia. We don't have many straight streets. We deliberately curve streets or go around trees. We deliberately keep the roads narrow, that people become more conscious of the scale of the forest, but also from the ecological sense, the narrower you can keep the road, the less it's going to dam up the groundwater, the less runoff there is, the less damage it does to the environment, and the slower the traffic will move. So this is contrary, completely opposite to, say, the standard devastating requirements of the planning commissions and planning departments of any city, where you would be required to produce 32 feet of paving, you would have sidewalks on both sides, and you would devastate the forest. You would also separate the community. We take the position in our pass system, for example, that it's, it's an old saying that it's the path of least resistance. That means that we have made it really simpler to ride by bicycle or by electric cart than it is to get into your automobile, swing around the loop, back onto the secondary and primary system to go anywhere in Sunriver.
I think an important thing on this same area that Bob's talking about is the idea that for a stranger coming in, it's difficult for him to find his way around, which is fine. That doesn't concern us. The person that lives here, he knows his way around, or he'll quickly find it.
Now, one of the things that I think you asked earlier is that how does it maintain its really kind of high-level quality and a sense of consistency? You may not be aware of it, but some of the best architects in the Northwest have been employed by Mr. Gray, by Sunriver Properties, to provide examples of what the architecture of Sunriver should be. As a part of the image and the fact of Sunriver, the lodge was built. The swimming pool was built. The existing buildings were renovated. The condominium units were designed and built. These by Church and Shields. What we call the Fairway Island condominiums were designed and built and continue to be built, designed by Zake Miller. Bob Wilson was employed to look at how one could stay in the forest. Now, we would write the criteria and do the basic design before the architect moved on to the project. But that meant means an exchange between us, Mr. Gray, and staff, and the architect. The architects must understand that they're subordinate to the forest. Individuality is encouraged, but within the criteria of the materials. It's really a great list of materials. But you can pick a house. Let's say you buy a lot, and this is one of the unique features, Sunriver. All right, I come driving along, right, off the county road. Here I come. Now bear in mind that the distance from here to here is about, I would say, it's about a mile, maybe more than a mile and a half. That's your house, destination A. I'm driving along, I drive through trees, but I haven't crossed a single curb. You realize that I'm in the forest all the way, and finally, the first house in 5,500 acres that I have entered and crossed a driveway on is my own. That's really a most remarkable. Now, sometimes because it's the cluster system, you will pass the maybe two houses, or you'll see houses along the way on the road. But if this were a normal project, you would have passed about 500 driveways.
Is Sunriver a sort of Republican Party's version of communism?
Say it again. Republican?
No, here you are, the commissar, and you've got a country out here.
Yes, from that degree, yes. I've gone through it once at a development on the coast where you have pretty much complete control. Pretty much the same thing here, where if you have to, you can say it will get done this way. And this has given us a great deal of freedom. Now you have to then question the final person who has to make the final authority. If he's a good guy and makes the right decisions, you come out great.
There's something else here. Here you have a developer who feels that he is accountable to society. Most are not, and they should be. And I think that this is a remarkable thing.
Who will know about wildlife?
By far the best person to talk to.
Who is that?
Jim Anderson.
Who is he?
He's our staff naturalist and ecologist who's here.
Full-time ecologist?
A naturalist.
What does he do?
A variety of things. He operates our Nature Studies Center, works with us on certain aspects of the land planning, on bird life, encouraging wildlife on the property, proper nesting of wild birds, questions about practices of fertilization, use of various types of sprays, are doing the right thing ecologically or not, conduct lots of off-site trips for guests who want to go out and see the desert, educates them on the way of wildlife, a coordinator with the various governmental agencies, state fish and game, wildlife management people, works with them very closely with the forestry department people on cooperative programs that affect us and affect the state. Give lectures to school kids on wildlife.
What about the artwork and the hangings and the what I call the chandelier and isn't, I know?
You don't do a half a lodge. You do a lodge that is and this one is probably the most beautiful lodge on the West Coast. When you have 30-foot ceilings and great fireplaces, stone fireplaces. This was an age of long ago. It isn't only what you can see now that's at Sunriver, but it's where our dreams are going from here. And I think that we see the whole cultural activity of Sunriver in what we call the Country Mall. And the Country Mall will be built in a kind of sequential steps. We'll start with the convenient shopping, perhaps. There will be boutiques, artist workshops, perhaps small theater, maybe 200-seat theater, a farmer's country store or market. We then move into artists in action and studios over and living apartments and a continuous skeleton or main street of activity, which is all pedestrian oriented, large spaces and small spaces. And ice cream shops, outdoor cafes. We're going to do it.
Hot dog stands,
music.
Done in a nice way, you know.
We call it, I think John's coined it, and she calls it a mixed bag. And I think that with quality you can mix these things, because that's the way people are. Hopefully the environment introduces the idea that life is a process, that you don't have to work in order to enjoy playing, but it's a continuous enjoyment of the day, the day's activity. But the environment within the country mall will be second to none. We'll have places where people will be playing the guitars, where fountains will be running, where there's night activity. And this all leads to the great theater that's being built, which will seat 3,000 people, outdoor amphitheater. Someday we hope to have great symphonies, Shakespeare, things like that. But you have to have this kind of a dream. And you can see all of the beginnings of these dreams. Even now, today, the whole nucleus is there. Even the theater is taking form. Along with this, we are developing along the river about 3 and perhaps 4 small villages which are airport-oriented. People who come in by airplane use the electric cart. They become a part of the whole pedestrian system. But their main love is the airplane. And these will be little small villages that are buried in the existing trees. Again, they are limited by the landscape. The landscape becomes the control for the whole project.
We debated for a hell of a long time as to whether or not to even put the airstrip in.
Right.
We had the meadow out there. We kept arguing back and forth. Well, should we ruin the meadow or putting the airstrip out there? We knew it'd be a nice thing economically. It helps land sales. It brings in people. But did we want to go to that effort, or not effort, but take that kind of a step on commercialism to ruin the meadow?
You notice something wonderful that happens is that between the lodge, between any sense of viewing of this central space, which is the great meadow, between you and the airstrip are grazing cows. And they're enjoying the grazing, and you don't hear the noise of the airplane. So
I've insisted upon in the very early design, even of the lodge, and the thinking about the meadow access, is we're always going to have a fenced meadow. We're always going to have grazing cattle out there, whether or not they are belong to somebody else or they're ours. We're going to be cattle grazers, but we're going to be sure that we have cattle.
I have to admit that looking out of that lodge and knowing that the airstrip there and maybe seeing an airplane come in and then seeing the cattle, the whole thing is so satisfying to me. I would hate to see that airstrip not there.
yeah, right. And
No, we're not sorry.
No, we're not
put
sorry.
the thing in, but, it was a very traumatic decision, I suppose, in a way.
I'll tell you
what that crisis, but
there was one little sort of great thing, how I was brainwashed on the airstrip. After I would talk about the merits of the bicycle and pedestrian walks and the pathway system and the recreation system. They'd come up and then tap me on the shoulder and say, now if those people came in by airplane, they wouldn't have cars, therefore the whole recreation system would work. So they had me on my own. So I had to go along with that. I'll give you another little tidbit, which I think is particularly significant. Just in my own office, we've had letter inquiries from people about Sunriver. And it's interesting to note that they come from landscape architects who are interested in even retiring or wanting to know more, because in this United States, this great courageous, technologically advanced country, there isn't really one decent city, you know, that you can live in.
Well, this is one Shangri-La. You don't really believe that there can be others, do you?
Oh yes, I hope so.
Do you honestly feel there can be another place like this?
Well, not like this, but hopefully we'll stimulate other people to come close to what we're doing, or hopefully, if they can, exceed what we're doing in the way of planning and land use. We think it takes some doing, but we hope to stimulate others to say, well, this can be economically successful. People will buy, people will live here. Let's do it someplace else.
From the very beginning, the basic philosophy of Sunriver was to answer in our own minds the question of, does the size of a man's pocketbook or his education exclude him from Sunriver? And to that end, we are around $15,000, for example, for a minimum development. And some of the developments will exceed $100,000 for a second home community. We find also that people will double up on a second home. But if you say if a house and lot costs $20,000 and two families get together, then the investment is really open to just about anybody in the United States in the lower income groups or middle income groups. So we're very conscious of that, and because we feel that it's really the respect for nature, and well, it's not the amount of money you have, but your attitude toward life and environment that should really bring you to Sunriver.
It is not our plan to sell property right down to the river bank. We could do this in a very few isolated areas where there's a very narrow peninsula. We're not likely to, but we could. Our concept is to keep a green belt along the river banks, 100 feet, 200 feet wide, depending upon the contour and the vegetation, so that in effect that's a common area, and that's a park clear along our 8 miles on this side of the river. Now, if we were in a hurry to develop the property, it would have been very logical to immediately subdivide it on the riverfront, sold it off and run.
It's based on a kind of a belief in something. And so far, nobody's tipped over the idea here. And I think that the roots keep digging deeper into the ground, you know, with more and more, and that it can show people another way. That's what the young people are saying, you know. The establishment can't do it, and there's no image of what can happen, and yet this is.
I think it would be a proper thing for you to say what direction you're going.
Are you on tape?
Yeah.
Okay. We're trying to build, obviously, a balanced community where we can provide employment for some people who have to work and who want to live here and work. So we'll can attract various levels of people. So therefore, we have planned here an industrial park. You might call it a research and development area. We hope to attract those kinds of industries that are more research-oriented. And with that in mind, we have set aside about 240 gross acres that they can be divided up in 1-acre tracts or 2-acre tracts or 5-acre tracts or 10-acre tracts, whatever the prospective tenant might want. There are types of industries that can do very well here, whose executives like to ski and they like to fly, they like the outdoors. Well, this is a great place for them to be. And we think some places in this United States there are 10 or 12 companies that wouldn't mind coming here and being here.
In all this conversation, you really didn't bring up the river, but always everyone was aware of it. I was aware of it, and I see it.
It's a plus. That's a dividend. It's the greatest thing. You know.
It's really the
8
hardest
miles,
place.
both sides, completely. It's really fabulous. That's how we started. Right? We drifted down the